Garnet, what do you think about Poilievre's comments on the RCMP? Do you support his viewpoint? What's your stance on the RCMP? What's your stance on the RCMP, sir?
Do you have confidence in the RCMP?
I support Pierre, that's for darn sure.
What do you support Pierre? Do you support your leader's comments on the RCMP?
I support the Blue Jays 110%.
Do you support
your leader's
Go
comments on the
Jays, go.
RCMP?
Go Jays,
Do you
go.
support
Conservative MPs there dodging questions today about their leader, Pierre Poilievre, and his criticism of the RCMP. Last week, Poilievre accused Canada's police force of covering up crimes committed by the Trudeau government, and he called the RCMP leadership despicable. In response, a former top aide to Prime Minister Stephen Harper wrote a scathing op-ed in the Toronto Star. Dimitri Soudis said Poilievre was dismantling the principled, trustworthy Conservative Party. Soudis described Poilievre as angry, addicted to opposition, and incapable of transformation. And the fallout has only picked up steam. Poilievre is facing a number of negative headlines in the media, some drawing direct comparisons to language used by President Donald Trump. Political leaders on Parliament Hill are also making that link.
Where is Pierre Poilievre's notion that the former Prime Minister should be jailed? It's deeply worrying because this is the kind of thing going on right now in Trump's United States. So I think Pierre Poilievre should reconsider his language, withdraw those words, and apologize.
The last thing Canada needs is the disturbing kind of rhetoric that we hear from south of the border. You know, we've heard Donald Trump repeatedly threaten his political opponents with jail. That is unacceptable, it's inappropriate, and frankly, it's dangerous to a democracy.
Okay, we're going to start there with the power panel today. Vanda Nakata was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst. Brad Levine is a former national campaign director for the NDP. And here with me is Tonda McCharles. She is, of course, the Ottawa bureau chief for the Toronto Star. It's good to see you all. Tonda, because you have home field advantage and the Blue Jays are in Game 7, we'll start with you. I mean, Pierre Poilievre is not apologizing, he's not recanting, but he is putting out a clarification of sorts, saying it didn't quite mean as
he didn't hit the
portrayed.
mark. Is that what he's saying?
Well,
yes,
not really.
No, that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Yes. No, what he's saying is he swung and he hit a big miss. Is what he's saying. Last week, for people who didn't actually see the original interview, he made a sweeping condemnation of RCMP leadership as despicable and as covering up for crimes of the former Prime Minister. And there was no nuance in what he said. Was he too comfortable with a set of friendly interviewers? Perhaps, but he certainly put no nuance there then in those give, and nor did he in the following few days. But over the weekend, he took a lot of hits for it. Particularly in the pages of our paper, when a former advisor to Stephen Harper came out and just slammed him for being irresponsible and focusing on grievance, not governance, and being distracted and making these kinds of comments that undermines responsible leadership of a Conservative Party leader. So, look, I think that in trying to clarify today, Mr. Poilievre has said, oh, but I didn't mean like all the current RCMP leadership. I only meant the past commissioner, and standing by his comments. I'm not sure that he escapes the knock that people within his own party and those opposition leaders you just heard from are putting against him, which is to say the mimicry of Trump's language is hurting the party, and it hurts the greater cause of faith in public institutions, faith in the police, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and Kate, Mike Duhem, the current commissioner, he was a deputy commissioner when this happened. And what's at issue here? Because some people have tried to say, oh, what he said about Justin Trudeau isn't news. And like, no, it isn't. But what he said about the RCMP sure was. And saying, you know, the exact quote is, if the RCMP had been doing its job and not covering up for him being Trudeau, then he would have been criminally charged. I mean, that's a big allegation to make with zero evidence and zero proof.
There was a lot of criticism around Commissioner, at the time, Lucki's handling of numerous files, whether or not they had enough information to actually make an assessment they were comfortable with on the SNC-Lavalin affair. Obviously, the government tried very hard to redact documents and block testimony at committee that would have perhaps unearthed some information that could have led the RCMP to make a more, at least a more informed decision as far as that proceeded. And there were a number of other scandals, of course, around the handling of the mass shooting in Nova Scotia and others that more than Conservatives brought attention to. It's in the pages of national media. All that being said, I do think that the Conservatives need to stay focused. Where they do well is in the message discipline on affordability and crime and immigration. And this has now taken the Conservatives off of that message track for the last number of days at a time when, workers at Stellantis are looking at job reductions. And we're seeing that happen across the country, largely due to the government's actions. So I think that, the lesson here for the Conservatives needs to be keep your eye on the prize. Don't get too comfortable with friendly media. And stay focused on the kitchen table issues that connected with so many Canadians just this past April.
Vandana, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, it creates a target. And not only is it's fine to criticize, the RCMP for rightful things, but it's not okay to slander an institution that Canadians need to have trust in. And I think the other thing is, to Kate's point, is this where Canadians are thinking about right now? When I was in opposition, everything I did with my leader was to make sure we try to gain more support of the Canadian electorate. And I don't think this does it. I don't think Canadians are thinking about something that happened a long time ago. I don't think they want a leader that advocates for them on those kitchen table items, on affordability, on the things that matter to them every day. And I don't think this is what hits the mark, but it makes him look more like, you're not ready to be the Prime Minister, you're going to stay in opposition.
Brad, is this, you saw the headlines there, and I don't know if the opposition leader's office cares that the national media is the columnists are taking a position on this, but it does penetrate. And obviously the statement that they put out today, attempting to clarify it, I'm just wondering what this says about where they think this issue has gone for them.
Yeah, the clarification that came out this weekend today is an indication that they're doing some backtracking and feel that this has gone on far too long and it's gone too far. So I think that's the first clue that he's in trouble. The second thing is that why is he going after the RCMP about decisions that a former commissioner made a while ago? And why is he using such language as despicable? You could say maybe not thorough enough, or maybe not comprehensive enough. But the word despicable is pretty strong, and I don't think a lot of Canadians would side with that or agree with that. If Poilievre's challenge, he's got the January leadership review. I'm sure he's fine there. I don't think this is going to upset that. But his broader goal is to make himself more likable, not to the far right, who may have some problems with law enforcement, which is funny to say in this day and age. You'd think that the Conservative movement in general would be foursquare behind law enforcement. But why is he going after them now at a time when he's trying to expand his electoral voter base among those moderate Canadians, particularly among women, where he's having a difficult time breaking in? This is certainly not a message to do that. The last point I'll make, why is he so confident that after fulsome investigations that he himself alone knows and has evidence that there was a potential cover-up by the RCMP or them not doing their fulsome job in order to protect Justin Trudeau? Again, Justin Trudeau's not on the ballot. Mark Carney and the other opposition leaders are going to be on the ballot. So he's still fighting former wars. Why at this time is he doing so? And why is he going so hard to suggest that he alone has evidence to suggest that our law enforcement in this country turned a blind eye to evidence? If he has such evidence, and I think the current commissioner called him out today and said, if you've got something, please bring it to us. Right. Why is he the judge and jury and suggesting not only is there evidence that was covered up, but then he knows so much that he's suggesting that there should be jail time? That is a pretty far-reaching. And if he can't get this stuff right, and again, I don't know why he's talking about this right now, especially when we've got crime and justice issues that are more important contemporarily, why is he the judge and jury? What does he know that the RCMP doesn't? And if he doesn't come forward with it, then Canadians, I think, are just going to say that he's not ready for prime time.
Look, it is clear that there are multiple findings that in the Aga Convocation and in SNC-Lavalin, ethics rules and conflict of interest rules were broken. But those are not criminal code. That is not those aren't crimes necessarily. They're violations of ethical frameworks. I'm not saying that to minimize them, but, you know, the ethics commissioner is not sending you to jail. But just to read you the clarification from Mr. Poilievre, just a little bit of it. The opening sentence is, I stand shoulder to shoulder with the brave men and women in uniform who put their lives on the line every day to protect and serve. Today and every day, I thank them for their service. Clearly, they've been getting some pushback for being too critical of police. And then the key graph is, my comments were directed to former RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, as Tonda said, who has a lengthy track record record of publicly documented scandals, deception, and political interference to the benefit of the Liberal government. We called for her resignation. We stand by that call to this day. Tanda, what's interesting is I can read that, and you have read that, because we got it in our emails from the press office in the opposition leader's office. This was not said out loud by Pierre Poilievre, despite appearing on camera, and it does not appear on any of his social media channels that I can find. And this is a guy who has shown when he wants a message to have mass penetration, he knows how to do it. They're just sending it to the reporters and the reporters only, and not disseminating it on their own channels.
Right, and I think that, you know, if I were Brenda Lucki, I'd probably take a really careful look at the language in that clarification, because it is pretty aggressive and assertive and potentially damaging to her reputation. You can argue that she and the force may have made certain calculations that the Conservative leader disagreed with, but to state, as this statement does, that she is guilty of a cover-up. And I think that just goes so far as to negate the value of clarifying it. You know what I mean? He's trying to put out a statement to do some damage control, but in the process is revealing still the same sort of, I think, misstep he's made in the first statements, and trying to clarify it that it's just, you know, the direction or the characterization of someone being despicable was really only directed at this one leader. I don't think saves him. And I think, to Brad's question about why is this happening now, I think we all have to sort of look at a few things that were happening there, and several things can be true at once. He was comfortable in that interview very clearly with friendly interviewers, and perhaps relaxed too much, but we all know Mr. Poilievre is a very skilled political commentator and, as you pointed out, messenger. And so what message is he sending to Conservative Party voters, for starters? Never mind that it's pissed off. Sorry,
That's okay.
a whole bunch of people who are his political opponents in the Commons. Forget that. I mean, what is it saying to broader voters and broader Conservative Party voters who are going to come up in January? Is he the leader that learned any lessons out of the last campaign, where a lot of people felt he should have broadened his coalition? Or is he doubling down on the leader who presented himself and lost the last election?
So, Kate, this media strategy here, it reminds me of when some of the members of the Conservative caucus had lunch with Christine Anderson, the controversial German member of the European Parliament. And when Pierre Poilievre wanted to disavow their participation in that, a statement went to the press gallery, nothing went on social, nothing was said at length on camera. And when we reported a statement, we were accused of fake news because it wasn't on his social media channels. If he wanted to correct this record more broadly, he knows how to do it. They're choosing to do it this way. What does that say to us?
Yeah, I think that it will make its way out there through the mainstream media. I'm sure if he were to be asked about it, then, you know, you might get a similar response. I think one thing, David, that could be done that would be helpful is to take the current commissioner up on his offer to meet. Because I do think that it's important that the Conservatives reinforce their relationship with the National Police Force and their commitment to crime and public safety issues. And I believe that, you know, the current commissioner made that offer last week, and Poilievre should take him up on it. I think that the longer we're debating and clarifying things, the more Conservatives are not focused on the issues that the majority of Canadians do connect with around affordability and around crime. There's plenty of red meat for Conservatives to go after on those two issues as it relates to the current government, not the last one.
Yeah, look, he could have a press conference tomorrow, but we'll see if he wants to address it directly. But Vandana, what do you make of this compartmentalized comm strategy, that his social channels are the way Mr. Poilievre communicates directly with his supporters and with his base? If he wants to clear this up, he can do it there, and he's choosing not to.
He doesn't want to. I think what the statement was to appease some stakeholders and maybe some caucus members who felt that that was deserved. I think for him, he stands by what he says. And I think he is trying to gear that towards a very small group of the Conservative base that may feel strongly about what he said and may feel that they have concern with law enforcement and institutions in general. I don't think that serves the Canadian public, but I don't think he necessarily cares to share that or to clarify that. So if he wants to get a message out, he will. But it ends up being an old goal for him. So every day that people are talking about this and that his own party is criticizing, and maybe it's not his caucus, but members outside, it is going to hurt him. So every day we're not talking about this is a day we're missing that talking about what's the Conservatives saying on affordability or an attack to the government, which is what an opposition is meant to do. So I think it's an own goal. I think it's a misstep. Does he feel that way? I don't think so. I think he stands by it, and he knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, Brad, those images of Conservative MP after Conservative MP running by the cameras, I mean, it becomes a 10-foot pole, 11-foot pole, 12-foot pole every time the question is asked. Last word to you, and then we've got to take a break. I mean, why do you think it is being done this way?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's still a mystery. We don't know the answer to that, but I know briefing caucus members in front of cameras as they walk in out of the House of Commons. It's not an accident that nobody wanted to talk about it. It's because this is a highly uncomfortable topic for Conservative caucus members. They don't have their marching orders of what to say, or at least they haven't designated a spokesperson, to get this right. And they've issued a statement as opposed to putting the leader out. So all of these things in the communications game tell us that they are in retracting mode, and that they're hoping that it goes away, hoping for something else maybe to take over the news cycle.
Well, just last note, they actually did get their marching orders. They did get talking points this morning of what to say in public, and none of them chose to even embrace what Mr. Poilievre's own talking points were today.
Well, that's a bigger issue than Tonda.
Yeah, and the comments in the podcast were in the present tense, not in the historical sense. The leadership is. So anyway, further clarification, invited, Mr. Poilievre, if you'd like to come on and talk about it.
Let's bring in our front bench to unpack some of this. With me tonight, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt is here. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you. These comments and the reaction to them had been discussed already, Tom, and then I was kind of a little bit surprised today to see the statement of clarification. I've covered Mr. Poilievre's leadership for the last 3 years. I can't remember the last time there was a statement of clarification issued a few days after something like this had surfaced. What does that tell you about what might be happening behind the scenes?
Well, the retroactive reflections and the attempt to change what he actually said is an indication that he's in trouble with some parts of the Conservative base, and he had no choice but to start scrambling. I had to go back to the actual quote to make sure that I hadn't missed something, because now he says, of course, that he was talking about an individual that he names, Brenda Lucki. Here's the quote. The leadership of the RCMP is frankly just despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government. In the quotes that we just saw, both in the House and in writing, he's trying to say, one, it was about an individual. Two, he never attacked the institution. That's what he did in that quote. And he's a very articulate person. He knows what he's saying, and he knows what it means when he's saying it. I think he was rising to the sound of his own voice as he was speaking to a home audience. It was almost as if he was chatting in his living room with people from a media outlet that tend to push his point of view. This is dangerous for the Conservatives if they ever hope to form government. You can't have someone saying that even though the police have carried out a thorough investigation, that you know that a crime was committed and that it is a cover-up, because that was the other word that he used, a cover-up, that there was a decision not to prosecute criminally. There is a requirement. You have certain heights that have to be met in going over those barriers, and if you don't, you can't prosecute criminally. You know, I have to remind folks that Mr. Poilievre was just a backbencher when most of the things that he's talked about happens. I was the leader of the opposition. And can I share with the people listening tonight, I was a bit frustrated. I thought the Aga Khan Island thing was more than just a scandal that merited a rap on the wrists from the ethics commissioner. But I'm also a lawyer, and I have a son who's been a police officer for 25 years, and I really take offense at hearing one of the most senior politicians in our country attacking an institution, attacking its entire leadership, because that's what he did. He did not single out an individual in a single case. He singled out the leader. He talked about the leadership. I find it offensive, and I find it dangerous for our democracy, because in a free and democratic society, politicians don't get to wake up in the morning and say, I want this one prosecuted, and if you don't do it, it's because you're covering things up and you're not doing your job. And even 9 years later, I'll attack you personally. It's bonkers, and I think he's pushed back a lot of Canadians who might have been willing to give him and the Conservatives a second look. I don't think that sort of behavior is going to help his party in any way, shape, or form.
Lisa, I was thinking back today to all the SNC stuff because that's what it brings back. And I remember how many times I was interviewing you at that time and different, Marco Mendicino at that time. Like, it was day in and day out. I remember when that stuff was litigated for sure. Yeah. Why do you think the comments as they came through this week garnered the reaction they did? And why do you think ultimately that statement of clarification was issued rather today?
And I would go back to saying, why are we talking about Justin Trudeau? Why are we going back there? What's the connectivity to Mark Carney? That's my frustration with all of this. The leader was grossly imprecise in his original comments, and I'll give him that. I'll give him that. If he's saying that he meant to say Brenda Lucki, fine. But he was grossly imprecise when he did that. And the danger of something like that is you end up putting offside people who vote for you. I mean, I served in cabinet with Shelley Glover, who was an RCMP officer, who I'm sure would not take kindly to comments like that in terms of the general population. I'm glad the leader came out and made a very good clarification. I think that's appropriate. But I go back to the original stuff. Why are we talking about this? You know, the voters of today, the kids who are just turning 18 and the ones who are up to age 30, they don't remember. And I would point one other thing out too, Vashi, and this is, from the bottom of my heart, I prosecuted on this issue. I was the face in terms of having all of these questions. You interviewed me many times. I was defeated in 2019. The voters didn't seem to care. And that's what you be thinking about.
Yeah, I think to Lisa's point, Brian, the sort of strategic conclusions are very interesting. And I think they also, and I'm not sure what you think, reflect, like, everyone focused on, they didn't pivot enough to Trump. They didn't pivot enough on the Trump issue. My sense was the pivot that lacked was from Justin Trudeau to Mark Carney. And to Lisa's point, like, lots of this and the reaction to it sort of, like, to me, re-emphasizes or reinforces that idea that, like, they just have not, in a way, maybe I shouldn't generalize but the leader himself doesn't appear to have moved on too far from Justin Trudeau, or doesn't want to, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to say, and the last point might be the most prominent in the sense he doesn't want to. We had so much success for a good solid year and change on going after Trudeau, going up 20 points ahead in the polls, that maybe he just hopes that he can grab some of that magic again. And look, there's a bunch of other things to consider. Carney is doing quite well. His personal brand is quite popular, so they're probably trying to figure out a way to take a few points off of that, and they think maybe by attaching him to Trudeau as much as they can, or the government and the people that are a part of power in that government, is a way to do that. Now, I'm not sure it's all about strategy in this case. I mean, sort of long-form podcasts and sort of these types of interviews, maybe he just got comfortable, as Tom kind of mentioned, and was talking to his base. So that could be it too, and it's just something that he just is actually pretty irritated about from his point of view. He thinks something more should have happened. But I will say from Tom's points, I agree a lot. I will add one thing, though, that Lisa said. I do think that it's not necessarily with the base that he's going to lose points on this. I think it's more the general public, right? It's people that will kind of say to themselves, oh, maybe it's time we give another party a chance. Some people maybe in central Canada, even in Atlantic Canada, and they see this type of thing, it's going to turn them off. And not necessarily, I think a lot of people, it's said, and I agree with, a lot of people care, obviously, about these types of institutions and RCMP officers. Specifically, my father-in-law was an RCMP officer. So the idea that we all have these sort of, ideas of people that we know or people that are in our communities that we don't know that serve, and we feel for them, there's that component, sure. But there's also the idea of attacking the institution. And just sort of undermining these institutions. And that's certainly something we've seen a lot from Poilievre. I'm not convinced that that helps him with the general public. And not necessarily that the general public are all sort of the defenders of these institutions. Some of them will have complaints about institutions, there's no question. But it just feels like a Trump tactic when you're trying to undermine institutions. And I think for the general public in a general election, that's something Poilievre and the Conservatives would want to steer completely clear of.
I think even for, 40+% of the people who voted for the Conservatives in the last election, Benzie, a lot of them, if you look at public opinion polling, believe that the Conservatives are stronger on law and order, right? They align. I think they have the sense that the Conservatives are aligned more largely with law enforcement, right? That was their messaging last week until this podcast surfaced around all the legislation that was coming in, everything. So I would imagine that some of the pressure to put out this statement came from within caucus, right? And people who themselves felt a little bit uncomfortable with it.
There are a lot of conservatives who feel uncomfortable about it, Vashi. You and I have spoken to some of them, and Dimitri Soudas, who is the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's director of communications, a close aide of the former Prime Minister, he wrote a scathing op-ed piece in the Star on Friday that was our most read story for much of the day because so many people were poring over what Dimitri had to say. Basically saying that Mr. Poilievre hasn't evolved and he's not ready for prime time. And frankly, if you want to know how that party blew a 28 percentage point lead that they enjoyed on January 1st of this year and then lost the election, their fourth consecutive defeat, it's comments like that. It goes back to the leader. You know, his campaign team, Jenny Byrne and others, got a lot of blame. I think a lot of it unfairly, frankly. And then you see things like this and you say, you know what, maybe it was the leader and it's not the team, it's him. You know, he's the problem. And I think, look, maybe this helps him with some fringe elements in the leadership review in January in Calgary. But Brian's right. With the general public, the folks watching your show, Vashi, these are people who believe that the Mounties are the law of the land and are enforcing the law of the land, and they're not doing the bidding of any political party. It's just a very, very Trumpian thing to say, and I don't see how it helps him, and that's why he's clarifying and scrambling the way he is. And this is the first time that we've seen him do that in the years. And he's been a very disciplined leader. I think we all can agree. He's good on his talking points. He's a bright guy, but this shows a bit of panic because he messed up. And where did he mess up? On Northern Perspectives podcast, a podcast few viewers of Power Play probably have heard of.
Last week, the leader of the opposition put into question the independence of our judiciary, of the police, in fact, the very police that put their lives on the line to protect him. The leader has the next 30 seconds to make amends.
The honourable leader of the opposition.
Liberals are trying to distract from their inflation and rising cost of living by talking about their corruption.
The Government House Leader Stephen McKinnon there suggesting Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre apologize for controversial comments made last week about the RCMP. On the Northern Perspective podcast, Poilievre called the RCMP leadership despicable for, in his words, covering up for former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on the SNC-Lavalin affair. Now, several news outlets are reporting on the backlash to Poilievre's comments, some from inside the Conservative caucus. And that's the first topic for our daily power rankings. I'm joined today by Rick Bell, a columnist with Post Media. There he is. Rob Benzie is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park bureau chief, and Stephanie Levitz is a senior parliamentary reporter for the Globe and Mail. Benzie, let's start with you. I think your paper was the first to get a look at the internal Conservative talking points. A novel defense saying the Liberals are distracting from the corruption with their, terrible management of things. What do you make of this issue as it's landed in the Conservative leader's lap?
It is, I mean, and the fact that his office had to issue a clarification of sorts. I mean, Mr. Poilievre doesn't do apologies. He's not a particularly repentant type of politician. That's not been his style. And I think he said something that he clearly must regret because it was an idiotic thing to say. It was a very foolish thing to say. And we've seen the backlash. In my paper on Friday, Dimitri Soudas, the former Prime Minister Harper's former communications czar, basically, Dimitri wrote a piece saying that this is why Poilievre hasn't evolved and he's not ready for prime time because he's saying things that are so out of the mainstream. I mean, Conservatives like to think of themselves, understandably, as the law and order party. So you can't, on the one hand, be saying we're the law and order party, and you're on a podcast saying how the leadership of the police is despicable, the National Police Force, it's despicable, and that they favor the Liberals. And then you're also, tweeting out about how you want the convoy protesters to get shorter sentences. It's not coherent. And remember, this is a party that promised more funding for the RCMP in the election that they lost in April to Mark Carney's Liberals.
Rick, do you think Mr. Poilievre regrets it, or do you think he believes it? Because there's a clarification sent only to the media. There's nothing on social media. He did not say anything new about it in front of the camera since it's become an issue. It's just press statements sent to us mainstream media types in the press gallery. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, this just in. There are a lot of people in the Conservative Party base that vote for the Conservative Party, including out here, who are not that fond of the RCMP. Whether they would say that the leadership was despicable or not is another question. Some probably would. But there is a perhaps greater skepticism about the Mounties out here than perhaps elsewhere. And of course, in Alberta, there's been a big push among some people for a provincial police force for exactly that reason. But if you're going to go that hard, then make sure you're not going to back up. Even if it's not that much of a backup, I just don't think, I mean, a guy like Trump just says stuff and he never backs up. But with Poilievre, if you're going to say that and then have to qualify it, that does become a distraction. Does he believe it? I think he probably has a view of the RCMP leadership even now that is not as glowing as perhaps leaders of other political parties. But if you're gonna really drop the bomb, then you've got to be and then some of your followers go on social media and they say, "Way to go, Pierre! Way to go! You told them," et cetera, et cetera. And then you have to start offering clarifications about exactly what you meant. It was a more nuanced situation. You can't do that. Very often.
Well, yeah.
If he doesn't want to call them despicable, then don't call them despicable. But once you've decided to say that in the way that you said it, you have to kind of stick with that, or you can't at least qualify things very often.
But Steph, there's no dispute that the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Trudeau, and his government, they broke ethics laws multiple times. This is in reports from the Ethics Commissioner, conflict of interest reports. There's no suggestion that I've read that he should be in jail or that the RCMP covered up criminality. So, to Rick's point, maybe some people in the base believe this, but I would think he probably has the Mountie skeptics on board. It's kind of everyone else this is maybe an issue with, right?
Why are we talking about Justin Trudeau? If you're Mr. Poilievre. Justin Trudeau is not the Prime Minister anymore. And so I find it remarkable that he has devised, through intemperate comments of his own making, we are now back to discussing a Trudeau-era government that Mark Carney's Liberals are doing everything they can to distance themselves from, and Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, or at least Mr. Poilievre, keeps trying to yoke them together. But Canadians have clearly divorced the two. Canadians have clearly argued that, Mr. Carney is a different Liberal Prime Minister. This is a different Liberal Party. The allegations Mr. Poilievre is making against the RCMP, I mean, there has been documentation surfaced by Democracy Watch and others that went exactly through the reasons that the RCMP chose not to pursue criminal charges in the case of SNC-Lavalin, in the case of the trip with the Aga Khan. Some of that was because the Liberals were stonewalling them. Right? The Liberals wouldn't disclose all of the relevant documents at hand. So is that the RCMP covering up for the Liberals, or the Liberals covering up for the Liberals, or which is it there? And I guess I just go back to, Mr. Poilievre swiftly, relatively, choosing to have a statement issued in his own name. This is a guy who is known to be disciplined. He is known to be single message track. When he goes off message, bad things happen. This is the lead up to the federal budget for the Conservatives. This is where they're trying very, very hard to frame Mr. Carney in a particular way. And what happens in question period? They ask a question on the budget, they get slammed on these comments with Lucki. So it's a big political distraction for him, and, one he can't afford.
And look, the next time he has a press conference, he's going to be asked about it, right? And so you're going to have to bite the bullet on this at some point eventually. Rick Bell, Rob Benzie, Stephanie Levis, thank you so much. I am David Cochran. Thank you all for watching Power and Politics. We're back in 22 hours with the next edition of the show. I'll see you on Tuesday, but Hannah Mansing tonight is up next right here on CBC News Network. See you tomorrow. Go Jays.